This week, no particular album, no particular artist. That's because we're speaking to Dr. Demento. Thank you for being with us this week.
Oh, nice to be here, Jason.
First of all, I mean, I think it goes without saying it's an honor to have you here, but it's also kind of overwhelming because I don't know, I didn't know originally what I should concentrate on, but I did get a little advice from friend of the show, Dan Pasternak, who said make sure you talk to him about this, and this. So we will go over a few things that I might not have necessarily thought to ask you about.
Very good.
So you started collecting records. I was going to say vinyl, but that's not necessarily true. You started collecting records when you were about 12. Is that right?
Yeah, actively when I was 12. My folks had a lot of records, so the record player became my favorite toy at a very early stage in life. They taught me how to operate it when I was 4 years old, and at that time, vinyl wasn't quite in the picture yet.
Yeah.
Most records were 78s made out of shellac. This was the late 1940s, and I started asking them for a little money to buy certain favorite records when I was maybe 8. First one that I actually specifically asked for was Lavender Blue Dilly Dilly by Burl Ives. We had seen the film So Dear to My Heart, a Disney live-action film, and Burl Ives sang that song in the movie, so I wanted a record of it, and they obliged, and then they started getting me other records, and of course they gave me full access to what they had. My dad brought home every so often a new Spike Jones record. The first one that I remember was Cocktails for Two, which came out when I was 4, so that's about right. And every maybe couple of times a year he'd bring home another new one, and we'd listen to Spike Jones on the radio. So that was my introduction really to funny records. Along with Arthur Godfrey, my mother would listen to him when she did her ironing in the morning. And of course he made some records, of which some were certainly of comedy, humorous songs. The Too Fat Polka was a favorite. And so that was some of the first funny stuff that I heard on records.
All right. Well, that's one of my first questions. Usually, is I always want to know. Did you live in a funny family? Was it your family that introduced you to comedy? And I guess that definitely answers that.
Yeah, right. I won't say that they were hardcore comedy fans.
Sure.
They were into culture. They had season tickets to the symphony. They were involved in the management of the art museums there as volunteers, and they were both voracious readers, so that's kind of what I was raised with.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, too, is, I mean, you say hardcore comedy fan, and, you expect people to use the phrase comedy nerd now. I think you kind of invented what it means to be a comedy nerd because you were one of the first people archiving it so voraciously.
Yes. It started just as kind of a crazy left turn that my career took. Through the 50s, I liked all kinds of music, the current top 40, especially when rock and roll started coming in. I loved that. And I went to the Salvation Armory every week where they had 78s for a nickel apiece, all kinds of stuff. Fairly recent and going way back to pretty much the beginning of records. So I taught myself by sampling this and that, what was amusing and what was entertaining in other ways. I picked up all kinds of things, but never really specialized in comedy above and beyond everything else until the opportunity came to do the Dr. Demento show.
Yeah.
Now, I was known as something of an expert on the early days of rock and roll. I had written about it for Rolling Stone and Hit Parader. This was in the late 60s. So when I got invited to play some records and tell a few stories on a local FM radio station, they eventually invited me to do my own rare rock and roll oldies show. But novelty records were always a part of that.
Sure.
I'd always play one or two because going back to the 50s when at any given time there was usually at least one novelty record on the charts, whether it was Flying Saucer by Buchanan and Goodman or Transfusion by Nervous Norvis, all kinds of things like that. So I would stick some of those in, and people would ask for more of those. I started to notice that novelty records were dominating the requests that I get when I'd ask, what would you like to hear? What would you like to have me bring along from my collection next week? And the more of those funny records that I played, the more popular the show got. So without really intending it that way, the Dr. Demento show turned into a funny music show and spoken comedy too. And that transformation happened gradually over maybe the course of a year and a half or so.
And you now did you started in radio around 1970? Is that right?
1970 was when I was first invited to be a regular guest on the Obscene Stephen Clean show on KPPC FM, Pasadena, and my weekly appearances became very popular, so they gave me my own show in the spring of 71, and it was Stephen who gave me the name Dr. Demento, credit where credit is due there.
That's wonderful. Now, what was your, well, I hate to say angle, but I can't think of another. What was your angle for your show? Was it, I just want to play stuff that I'm interested in and I'd like to expose other people to it? I mean, that tends to be the MO of most DJs, but...
Yeah, that's what it was. They gave me free rein to play anything that I liked. At first it was rare rock and roll oldies, but then it became the funny stuff. And if it brought in the people and the listeners seemed to enjoy it, the station was certainly fine with that. So,
well, and you've got this academic background also of putting this heavy analytical head to music, to quote unquote straight music, but I know that you've got to vet all this, all these songs and these tracks for your own show. Do you is it the same kind of analysis, or is it the same? I'm just curious, how is there a comparison to be made to how you might do the?
Definitely a comparison. I mean, on my show today, I might explain the background, how a certain record came to be, and in some cases perhaps explain a couple of the references that might be lost to the mists of time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't give it the same extensive academic background that I might get, like if I were to write some liner or booklet notes for an album of old blues, something like that.
Right.
I wouldn't go into quite that much detail because I'm there on the radio, and
sure.
For all those years I was in commercial radio, so there was some kind of I won't say pressure, well maybe I will say pressure, to keep it lively, to keep it up, to keep it interesting, to keep people from being tempted to wander down the dial to KLOS.
Sure. Was there ever a moment, well, now that you're not on terrestrial radio, do you get to be more analytical, or is there any interest in being more analytical of stuff that is novelty?
Oh, a little bit. I don't feel the need to go quite as fast these days, and I maybe get a little bit deeper into my collection.
Sure.
Play, like, instead of just, for Nervous Norvis, instead of just Transfusion and Ape Call, I might go into some of his lesser-known cuts now and then. Same with Spike Jones or people like that.
What is...
And I play also a little more older things. When the show got syndicated nationally, we were dealing with program directors from all over the country, and some of them would get a little impatient and nervous if I played too much stuff that was like from before the rock era.
Oh, okay.
Especially if it was things where it was obvious that the recording was made a long time ago.
Sure. What's the oldest thing that you have in your collection?
Oh, I have a few Berliner 78s. Actually, the speed is anywhere from 60 to 90. They weren't very consistent. Of various kinds of music from just before the turn of the century. 1897 is the oldest one. So those are the oldest actual original hard copies that I have here in my collection. I have sound files of things that are a little older than that.
Right. Did you ever feel a need to or try to delve into collecting anything older? Do you own any cylinders?
I have a few just to show people what they look like.
Okay.
It's not something that I specialize in. I tend to get more excited about records from 1925 onward, when electrical recording came in and they could record sound and music more realistically than they could before.
And they could be more consistent too, right? Because at some point I know that it was almost impossible to replicate, especially cylinders. They had to do, 100, 100 different sessions just to make enough to sell them, right?
In the real early days, yes, before they figured out how to mass produce them.
Yeah.
Now, that's one of the reasons that, one of several reasons that discs won the format war and cylinders were left behind, because it was much easier to mass produce discs. They figured out how to do it with cylinders, but it was trickier.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's just easy enough just to, if you're going to make a mold of something, just putting it on something flat was probably a heck of a lot easier to replicate any fidelity. Okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense. So then, do you make a distinction, and maybe you can clarify it for me, between novelty and, because the thing is, I feel like if you say novelty, people might immediately turn off in their heads, and whereas maybe you say comedy,
for
they
that
won't.
reason, go ahead.
Sorry, no, but whereas maybe if they say comedy, they won't, or maybe if they even I know people will turn off if they hear comedy too, but even comedy snobs might turn off if they hear novelty.
Yeah, well, that word has had many different meanings through the years. In the 50s, the record companies started using it as a word for funny songs and occasionally like quirky instrumentals that came out on 45s. And some of these became overnight hits, but they had a tendency to have a rather short shelf life.
Right.
And it was because of that novelty kind of became a little bit of a disparaging word with many in the record business and with many collectors as well. But I don't feel any problem using it nowadays on my show, since I'm not competing with the next station down the block, and the people who listen to my show, I know most of them pretty much like what I'm doing, and
For
I
sure.
don't feel the need to defend it.
Right, which is nice, and that's one of those things where I feel like, because there are occasions where I felt the need to defend maybe artists that I love, even somebody as popular as Weird Al, where I've had to make the distinction and try to explain to people that just because the word novelty is in there doesn't necessarily mean that it's ephemeral either.
Right. So I tend to use the word novelty to mean things from what I might call the golden age of novelty records, roughly from the mid-50s to the mid-60s.
Yeah.
When at any given time there was generally something like the Purple People Eater or the Monster Mash or some lesser thing along the same line on the charts.
Right. What's funny too is, I mean, I know that you've picked songs like maybe Charlie Brown, which in my head it would never have occurred to me was considered a novelty record, just because it seems like straight rock and roll to me.
Yeah, well, except that the words are humorous.
Sure.
The same with many of the Coasters records. I don't think Lieber and Stoller, who wrote and produced those, I don't think they especially like to have them called novelty records, but
Right.
I have no trouble calling them that.
Right. At that point, was the line between novelty and, like, quote unquote serious music blurred the most in the 50s and 60s, where it was easier to get something on the air?
Oh, well, I don't know if it was easier to get stuff on the air. Maybe it was compared to today. I don't know if this is specifically your question, but I don't worry too much about drawing lines between different categories of any kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have to sometimes when filing stuff. The
Sure.
blues is over there, and the middle of the road, as they used to call it, is over there. They're on different shelves in my record room.
Yeah.
But I try not to be too concerned with drawing the line. Like Ray Charles, where do you put him?
Sure.
Is he R&B? Is he middle of the road? Is he even country?
Right.
He's in the middle of the road section, but
Sure.
he may not be too comfortable there. But I had to put him somewhere, so that's where he is.
No, of course, yeah. I mean, that's as far as, yeah, like you say, in terms of filing something, of course, you do need to make some kind of distinctions. I guess I meant because we don't hear enough comedy stuff on the, you don't hear a lot of anything on the radio, but you don't hear a whole lot of comedy on the radio, and it seemed like it was just part of the programming at that point.
Right. Well, on my show, I don't have to worry about that too much.
Sure. Of course. if we go back to the beginning of recorded sound, obviously the first stuff that was ever recorded was, first of all, they were experiments. I mean, Mary Had a Little Lamb, although that's not the first thing that was ever recorded, much as Edison might have liked us to think it was. I mean, is there anything going back in sort of that far back? Like, was there anything experimental or brief that was comedic? Because, I mean, I went to film school, and I know there are plenty of small, short experimental films that were comedic. A guy getting kicked in the butt, that's easy to translate. But is there anything back that far, the early days, that we could be considered comedy?
Well, it was real early on that a guy named Cal Stewart became popular. He was a monologuist. You might call him a stand-up comedian. He did perform in auditoriums. He had this character called Uncle Josh, who was a New England farmer, kind of what we might call a hayseed. He was rural and not a city guy, but he did all these comedy routines, these stand-up bits, which in many cases were about his Uncle Josh's experiences with things from the city, with new inventions. He'd go into New York and he'd do a story about encountering a Chinese laundry or a department store or something like that. And there'd usually be something funny about what would happen to him, or he would have some insights about what was going on there.
Oh, okay.
Uncle Josh in a Chinese laundry is downright racist.
Sure, I had a feeling.
Most of the others are pretty innocent. He has I think my favorite pieces of him are about when he got his first car, his first automobile.
And this is going back how far?
He started just before the turn of the century.
Wow.
And was certainly the best-selling comedy artist and one of the best-selling artists, period, until he died.
Wow.
Right in the peak of his career. I think it was 1920 or 21 that he died.
Jeez.
Rather suddenly. But right up until then, he sold tons of records.
That's amazing. This is the kind of thing, because I think I anticipated your answer to be was that it would be some kind of comedic music, because I've got a few old cylinder recordings, not actual cylinders, but MP3s of cylinder recordings, and most of them were musical, most of them were ethnic. Which
you have people singing the Tin Pan Alley hits of the day that
Sure.
You start getting that right away. There were certain things were easier to record than others. Uncle Josh was real easy to record. He just talked most of the time. He had a few songs where they'd have a piano player, but most of the time he just talked. And there were other singers like Billy Murray is another name that you deal with in the early days of recording. He started right around the turn of the century and remained popular up until the early 30s. Billy Murray sang just about every kind of song there was, but he specialized in comedy songs, the funny songs that Tin Pan Alley produced. And he was noted because he could learn a song quickly and because he could enunciate clearly on those early record players, on the wind-up Victrolas and so on. It's not always easy to understand the lyrics.
Sure.
But he kind of, just subtly kind of overpronounced things so that you could always understand the lyrics, even if he was doing a fairly fast-paced patter type of funny song. The first one of his that comes to mind is he'd have to get out and get under to fix up his automobile. Once again, there are funny songs about cars too.
I feel like that one maybe I've heard. It's what's interesting too is the kind of limitations. We don't have. I mean, we got it easy now. Anybody who does comedy now, we don't really have a technological limitation to work with like that. It kind of blows my mind that somebody was able to translate comedy at all.
So, it was funny records were big sellers, like right from the beginning, and those two guys, Cal Stewart and Billy Murray, would be at the head of the pack, but there were, of course, quite a few others. Al Jolson did a funny song now and then, and he became one of the biggest sellers, right around 1912 he started.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, so when you went and you were buying these when you first went, you would go to the Salvation Army. I mean, it sounds like from what I've read, and I don't know how accurate it is, it just sounds like your record collection kind of exploded in your early teens.
Yeah, well, especially after I got to Los Angeles,
Uh-huh.
it is probably really when it exploded.
Okay.
I couldn't go to the Salvation Army and get records for a nickel anymore, but they still had some for a quarter. But I was, I had a job. I could spend a little more, so I
Sure.
could collect a little more actively, rather than just subsisting on what I found in thrift shops.
Were you and are you how how discriminating are you? Or at the time, was it more just discovering you buy everything you saw?
Yeah, for years it was like that, and it was. I have kind of backed off a little bit on my collecting in recent years.
Sure.
For a number of reasons.
Yeah.
I have. There are more records in this house than I could ever listen to. I'm in my 70s than I could ever listen to
Yeah.
at any time while
Yeah.
I'm still able to put a record on the record player. So I'm starting to confront that.
Sure.
Whereas I used to think, well, I'll keep all these records. I'll get around to listening to them sometime.
Right. Well, I'm myself am having that problem, and I've only got about 300 records in the collection, which I'm sure would be satisfying to see with the millions I'm sure you have sitting around. But yeah, even then, I don't know how I'm going to get to all of them. I'll do it. I'm sure I'll do it.
Yeah, okay. I no longer feel the pressure to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Is it? Well, then what? At this point, then what's going to make the deciding factor for you? Where I'm going to sit down, I'm going to give this one a shot. I've never heard it before.
Well, new stuff keeps coming in.
Yeah.
Not on vinyl anymore,
Sure.
but new stuff keeps coming in, and the majority of the listening time that's related to the show is listening to what people send me on CD and on MP3 mostly.
When did that start? When did people start submitting stuff? Was it your choice to have people submit stuff, or did they just start doing it?
Oh, they just started doing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was about 3 or 4 years in, after the show had become pretty obviously I was the funny record guy.
Uh-huh.
And so at first people started sending me tapes of records that they had. Other people who had funny records that maybe they hadn't heard on my show, so they'd send me a tape of something they had. Relatively, there were 45s and 78s and comedy LPs, all kinds of stuff people would send. And then a couple people started sending me tapes of things that they had recorded themselves. And when I played one of those on the air by the Rotor-Rooter Good Time Christmas Band, that certainly inspired more people to send in stuff like that.
Of course.
There was a guy named, a teenager at the time, Brad Stanfield, who sent me a song accompanied by his guitar called Waffle Whiffer, and another one called Gumball Wizard, a parody of Pinball Wizard. And I thought those were pretty funny and well recorded, so I played those on the air, and that in turn inspired 16-year-old Alfred Yankovic of Linwood, California, to start sending me the songs that he was making up and playing on his accordion. And you know where that went.
Yeah. Wow. That's just what's interesting though is that people just people assumed, and since you're a nice enough guy and you have discerning taste, and you were just like, well, no, it's cool that it's interesting to hear that when you first started getting them, you're like, well, let me look at these for what they are and see if there's some value, and you wanted to make sure it sounded good enough to play on the air. I'm sure in the case of somebody who sends you a grumbly sounding cassette, you had to sort of it was kind of a 50-50 shot, even if it was a good song.
Yes, there's lots of borderline involved, lots of things that were marginal.
Yeah.
With records that I've found and all kinds of things that I've listened to, and especially with the tapes, the unsolicited tapes that started coming in, dozens of them every week. It became a major part of my day to listen to all those things. And sometimes I'd hear 10 or 12 mediocre ones in a row, and I had to really force myself to listen to the next one, and then that might be the great one for that week.
Yeah.
So a lot of that, and still today, maybe not quite as much as there was, but still a lot of that. So And sound quality does enter into it to some point. I don't insist that everything sound like it was recorded at Abbey Road,
Sure.
but it has to be intelligible. We're dealing with comedy here. You have to be able to understand the words, and there are people who don't understand that, especially people like who maybe came out of the punk movement and decided to do a funny punk song, but then it's can't understand any of the words. But Alfred Yankovic understood that from the very beginning. He was using very cheap equipment when he started, but he, I guess through trial and error or something, knew from the very first tape that he sent me how to make his words come through, how to link words to music, how to write words so that they fit the tune. A lot of things that a lot of people still don't know today, but he at age 16 had that down.
It's amazing. I do feel like there's a part of my teenagehood that was I hugely missed out because I grew up in upstate New York in a place where we didn't have a whole lot of exposure to much outside of upstate New York. So we didn't have your show. Nobody near me carried your show. It wasn't a thing so I didn't hear about. I think I got a compilation of yours when I was a teenager. It was one that had Henry Phillips on it. And that's the first time I ever knew of you. And there was some newer stuff, definitely some older stuff. And I've been trying to put through my head what it was like to listen to your show, because sure, you're a nice guy, but you also get to, you play a bit of a character on the radio. You do this one particular thing, and I've been trying to figure it out. What makes people like me, mostly nerds, what makes them love listening to your show so much? And there is just something about, at least for me, it's this discovering of something that only this one other person knows about. And it's this pact between the listener and Dr. Demento. Did you ever sort of get that feeling from your fans? It's just like, thank you for sharing this thing with me and nobody else knows about it, even though tons of other people have heard it?
Well, people would say things like that when they'd write me letters or when they'd meet me in person. I never spent a whole lot of time analyzing what made that relationship tick.
Sure.
I just had something that I did and still do, and it gradually developed. I do the best I can at it every week, and there's little decisions to be made and occasionally big ones as to which way I'm going to go with something, but I just try to do the best I can. I don't spend a lot of time analyzing it.
Of course, yeah.
I have to leave that to other people who can see the phenomenon from outside or whatever. And eventually I had people that managed me, and they would make suggestions sometimes, which were sometimes helpful. When I got over to KMET, a bigger, more commercial station, they would sometimes make suggestions as to how best to keep people enjoying my show and not tune me out. And KMET was the big rock station in town, but their arch rival, KLOS, was right next to it on the dial. So it was pretty easy for people to switch back and forth. So
right.
They made me aware of that and to keep the pace going and to not wander too far afield from what the largest part of my audience liked. So when Fish Heads and Dead Puppies came along, I was aware that those were hits, and
right.
I would look for more songs like that, and I would play those songs fairly often. Many songs would only come up like once a year or once every 5 years, but
right.
I was aware of the value of playing Fish Heads and Dead Puppies fairly often. Of course, now that I'm on internet radio and dealing mostly with people who already have those songs in their collections, I don't have to play them that often. But at that time, I realized that there were certain things that the audience clearly liked, things that were fairly fast-moving and musically somewhat comprehensible. And in the 70s especially, a certain fairly large part of my audience loved drug songs.
Oh, sure.
Especially about marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that was clever about smoking weed was probably going to get a pretty good reaction from my audience at that time.
Yeah.
Because they were rock fans. You tend to think of the rock music of the 70s and 80s as classic rock because the stations that we have today that play that music, they're classic rock stations,
Right.
the Sound and KLOS. But at that time, it was new music.
Yeah. Did you?
So people who liked that, mostly the audience skewed male and tended to be in their teens and 20s, people who would certainly pick up every new Aerosmith album, and those were a lot of the same people, though not all of the same people who enjoyed my show. So I was thinking of that kind of person, though I certainly also had people who were much older or a little bit younger and had more tastes that were a little bit esoteric, not so mainstream, and I tried to keep those people happy too.
Yeah.
So I'm still that way, you might say.
Did you have anybody helping? I mean, being, I don't want to use the term tastemaker, but I just did. But being somebody who gets to deliver this stuff personally to people. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons it means so much to people is because they've got this one guy who they feel like they can relate to, who's giving them this thing that feels like it's kind of a gift. Even if you're repeating it, it's something. It's there are those evergreen songs. Did you have somebody when you were a teenager giving you this stuff, or was it just a very personal thing for you? Was it only you?
It was self-discovery. I mean, when I was a kid, there was my parents, and when I started buying records at the Salvation Army, my father had passed away by that time, but my mother would, of course, talk to me. She would notice that I had brought home something that was popular when she was a kid or when she was a young adult, and she'd tell me about it. So that helped. Outside of that, though, I pretty much taught myself on my own. I mean, there weren't a lot of books about it. There was one book which covered popular music, the history of popular music in America, which had been written in the late 40s and was pretty thorough up to that point, and so that helped put things in context. But nowadays, on the internet, you can read about darn near everything. When I was younger, I used to run across records by Henry Burr all the time. He was a pop singer who appealed to an older audience at that time. He sang a lot of sentimental songs. So a lot of, when I got to know other collectors, they'd always say, Henry Burr, get rid of that. That's junk. Because they like jazz or blues, or at least something that was more entertaining to them than hearing Henry Burr sing some sentimental song that older people liked in 1920. But nowadays on the internet, there are people who like Henry Burr, and you can read all about him.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. I mean, you got to have... It was when it was okay to have an interest in old things, and people weren't necessarily going to crap on you for it. But although, I mean, it sounds like you had to put up with a little bit of that, but you stuck with it because of this unquenchable interest in music.
Yeah, I wanted to know something about all the forms of music that had been popular in this country at least.
Sure.
Through the whole history of records.
Why did that mean so much to you?
Why does it mean so much to me?
Yeah.
Oh, curiosity, I guess. I guess it's a thirst for knowledge or something like that. I want to know what got people excited at different times in our history.
Yeah. And it's something that you can personally experience because you can grab a copy of it, usually.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you about, as far as, can you play this older stuff? Do you have a machine to play everything that you want, or do you need to?
I do not own a cylinder player.
Sure.
But I know people who do.
Mm-hmm. How about, I mean, playing the old shellac ones?
I don't collect cylinders, so no. It's just, I have to draw a line somewhere.
Sure. What about the old shellac records, though?
Yeah, I can play those. I've certainly put a lot of effort into getting equipment that can play those pretty nicely.
Yeah.
I know people who devote a large part of their lives to that and restore 78s on a professional basis.
Wow.
With very expensive sound equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I have some pretty specialized stuff, not quite on that level. I haven't spent, I mean, for a probably ideal system for like recording 78s for reissue, you can easily spend $2 or $3 grand, and I haven't gone that far,
Yeah.
but I have spent, several $100s for an assortment of styli, different size needles, because you need a wider stylus to play 78s of any kind compared to what you play microgroove records with. But if you really get into it, you need about half a dozen different sizes of styli to play records from different eras made by different companies.
Are these newer?
Like
Go ahead. Sorry.
you may have seen. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask: are the newer ones more durable than the old ones that you could only get a couple plays out of? Then.
Well, they're not steel needles. These records were originally played with steel needles on the wind-up phonographs, and you're only supposed to use those for one play, though in the old days people often used them until they would slide across the record, and then they'd finally put a new one in, and that's why some of the old records you find are so badly worn.
Right.
But no, the 78s, I mean these special styli that I special order from people who make them will last a long time. I've had some for 20 years. I mean, if you treat them well, use them with equipment that doesn't have a whole lot of stylus pressure, they'll last a long time. They're diamond styli, just like the ones you'd have in a newer stereo.
Okay.
So, but like for instance, you may have seen the 1/4-inch thick records that the Edison company made.
Yeah.
And those take a different kind of stylus. And also, you have to wire your cartridge differently in order to play those properly. But they can be played on modern equipment.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's dedication to get those things to play.
So if I'm going to play an old record, I don't want the sound to be any more of an impediment to people enjoying it than it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can only do so much with some of those, but I want to do what I can within reason to make them sound decent so that people won't have to really struggle to hear the lyrics, for instance.
Sure. Is your method of getting people to listen to stuff that they might not otherwise listen to, such as something that's 100+ years old, is it just your trademark enthusiasm, or is there something else that you try and use to get people? I mean, they're not a captive audience, so I'm
Right.
curious what you use. What is your technique?
Well, I'll like maybe play something that's fairly approachable and fairly contemporary, and or that people are really used to hearing on my show, like Shel Silverstein or Tom Lehrer or somebody like that, and then maybe lead into something on an older record that is on a similar subject, something like that. Like Tom Lehrer's song Bright College Days can lead into a 1906 Billy Murray song called College Life.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them being satires of what it's like to go to college.
Yeah.
And you listen to College Life, and as antique as the music sounds, you realize that in some ways colleges haven't changed. Though that song talks quite a bit about hazing, which is certainly something that many colleges are trying to do away with,
Sure.
but it's still a fact of college life.
Absolutely. That's the other thing, too, is if, there is that inevitable thing where if you delve into this older music, you're going to find stuff that we now consider incredibly racist, incredibly sexist, homophobic, et cetera, et cetera. What do you do? I mean, you can't not listen if you're interested in this stuff, though.
Right. I tend to give that a pretty wide berth these days.
Yeah.
In the early days of my show, I did not necessarily do that, but I realize as much as I might love to tell my audience about how our culture has changed through the years and like what minstrel shows were like and
Sure.
What the songs of that era were like and what people enjoyed and how that maybe reflected our climate of the time. Some of that stuff would just result in more trouble for me than it's worth.
Of course.
So, on the other hand, I give lectures sometimes at colleges or to Mensa or something like that, and I will get into things like that, knowing that I have an audience that is willing to not get hysterical if they hear the N-word.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a super fine line, but I guess as long as people understand that you're there. I mean, we've talked about that kind of stuff on this podcast, and I at least try and prepare people that if something like that comes out, we're talking about it analytically, but it's really hard if you're talking about entertainment.
Yes. So you're right.
So I do have a copy of Dr. Demento's Delights, and I was looking at it earlier, and I was wondering, what was it, just the most popular stuff, or were you putting your own? Where'd the decision come from to put each and every one of those tracks on there?
Well, it was a lot of my most popular stuff. It was limited to some extent by what Warner Brothers could license.
Sure.
We licensed some things from other labels, but there was a little bit of a preference shown to things that were in the Warner Brothers catalog that they owned, that they already had the rights to, like They're Coming to Take Me Away or Hello Mudda, Hello Fada.
Sure.
But it's really just a snapshot of what was big on the show at the time. A couple of things that might not have been huge hits, but that I thought fit in nicely and that I would have liked to see on an album. And so, like, Who Put the Benzodrine in Mrs. Murphy's Ovaltine? I thought, yeah. So, yeah.
We have done that album, that compilation on here once. One of our guests did specifically want to talk about it, and I feel like that's one of the things that got me re-interested in, because again, like I think that might have been his exposure to you, same as my exposure to you was from a compilation. Luckily it was 2 CDs, so I got a hell of a lot of music to listen to.
Okay.
But there is something interesting about, maybe you have to have a certain mind, but that makes you laugh at Benny Bell when you're 13 or 16 in the 90s, that made,
for sure,
you know what I mean, that made you laugh at it when did you first hear that song? I mean, I feel like that's one of the most famous old songs that you play.
Shaving Cream?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the original record of it by Paul Wynn, written and produced by Benny Bell. Paul Wynn sang it.
Okay.
Another collector, a fellow named Brad Kay, played it for me. He's mostly a jazz collector, but he had he enjoyed the funny stuff too, and when he'd find something in a thrift shop like that, I think he found his copy of Shaving Cream in a thrift shop and played it for me, and I made a tape of it. And so the first few plays on my show were from that tape, but not too long after that, I happened to find a copy of it myself at a Salvation Army. So it was a Salvation Army in Pomona. I happened to be out there, and I thought, well, I'm out here, I'm going to go to the Salvation Army, and that's where I found that.
Yeah. And then you ended up, I couldn't find what year it was, but you ended up covering it yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I realized that a good way to wind up one of my live appearances was by singing a song. And I'm certainly no singer, but that was a song that I could make fit within my range. And plus I could make up new verses to it. I mean, that song was really written, the original sheet music of that has, I think, 30-some verses printed on it.
Wow.
So, of course, there were only room for 6 verses on the record, but it was written to add verses to. A little bit of the background of that song, Ben Samberg, his real name, was a songwriter before he ever made records himself, but he would write funny songs, and he occasionally get some of them recorded. And in 1931, he wrote a song called Sweet Violets. Sweet violets, sweeter than all the roses. That's how the chorus went. It was a waltz like Shaving Cream. And Shaving Cream was first written in the 30s as kind of an attempt to reproduce the success of Sweet Violets, which was Benny, until Shaving Cream came along, that was certainly Benny's best known, most popular song. So he was trying to reproduce that, and it just happened that that was the song that we came across. And to the ears of a younger generation, it's a little funnier than Sweet Violets.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's how that started, and so it was trying to develop something to wind up my live performances with that made me think, oh, I can sing Shaving Cream myself. So,
Sure.
so I did, yeah.
You know what's amazing? There are a lot of different aspects to what you do. Number one, I think, is exposing people to stuff they haven't heard before. Number two is giving them some of the old hits, but also playing stuff that you love, and then helping make careers, an entire career. I mean, others as well, but Weird Al is just this huge example of this massive impact that, what some people might not necessarily understand the importance of your show, but especially if they didn't hear it, and if wasn't part of their life growing up. And again, I still feel horrible that it wasn't part of mine, because it would have been the perfect show for me. But
that's just the way it went.
That's exactly right. But Weird Al was probably my biggest influence. I became best friends with my best friend because of Weird Al. So if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have this just massive, important comedic figure. And we'd also have this guy who's doing quote unquote novelty music, but knocking it out of the park somehow every time and getting better as he does it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I didn't set out to create him,
sure.
But I certainly, he came to my attention, and I realized that he was very good, better than just about anybody else who I knew about, certainly of his age. So I helped him all I could, played his stuff frequently, and kind of watched his career develop. I mean, in the early years, I certainly was very important in launching his career.
But, absolutely.
Eventually, he got played on MTV and kind of went to other areas. But it all started with me, and he's been pretty good at acknowledging that when people ask him.
Has he ever indicated what some of the early songs that he listened to on your show were? I mean, I know that he was a big fan of Spike Jones and Stan Freberg.
Yeah, he mentions those. The core artists of my show is who he mentions. Alan Sherman probably more than the others, because that would have led him into doing parodies, which is what got him going.
So I know that, again, when I spoke to Dan Pasternak, he asked that I specifically, bring up, since we unfortunately lost Stan Freberg recently, just to talk about his influence, and just, I mean, I know that you were a great lover of his work, and obviously, a friend of his, so I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit to his impact on the world of comedy and comedy music.
Okay, well, he made novelty singles starting in 1951. John and Marcia was the first under his own name. And then, well, I'll tell you how I first heard Freberg. I think I heard John and Marcia, some friends of ours had a TV, and somebody was doing John and Marcia on TV, using Freberg's record and using some sort of puppets to be John and Marcia.
Okay.
And I kind of remember that, but didn't know who Freberg was at that time. But then my mother, she loved Dragnet on radio before it was on TV. And so somewhere on the radio or at a friend's house, she heard Freberg's record of St. George and the Dragonet, and she immediately bought a copy and brought it home. So that's how I first became aware of Freberg. And I realized right away that this was brilliant. And even though comedy was just one of many things that I was into at that time, I certainly was aware of Freberg's further works, and sometimes would buy some. So when he did The Yellow Rose of Texas, I certainly was very much aware of that. Banana Boat and Heartbreak Hotel, and eventually the old Payola Roll Blues. I actually heard that on our local top 40 station.
Really?
I only heard it once, but they did play it. And went out and got that one. And eventually, of course, his albums. I kept following his work, was aware of his commercials, heard at least a couple of the Stan Freberg shows when they were first broadcast on CBS. And I couldn't quite afford the album that came out of those at that time. I mean, double LP. That was something you maybe got for Christmas.
Right,
at that time.
right.
But anyway, I was very much aware of him, and when the opportunity came to have him on my show, I was totally delighted.
His is one of those types of comedy that it's got this weird dichotomy of sharp, biting, almost angry satire with some of the goofiest comedy fronting it.
Yeah, that's right. So a Green Christmas, of course, that a very much misunderstood record for a while. People thought it was sacrilegious because it was making fun of our observances of Christmas. But they totally missed his point, was that the reason he was making fun of and ridiculing some of our Christmas celebrations was that he thought it took our attention away from the real meaning of Christmas.
Right.
I mean, he was a Christian. And he didn't like to see Christianity scorned.
Right. That I feel like that ends up being that's the risk that guys like him were willing to take, and I think that's what makes him such interesting artists too. Is just being so willing to have people toss some bullets your way, at least verbally.
Right.
That's a huge risk.
Yes.
I did have a couple. I asked a few people online if they had any questions for you. Number one, the first question somebody asked is, what was so special about the corner of Pico and Sepulveda, which I thought was a pretty funny question. Why that was so important enough to make that ever became a song.
Well, I know the story of how it was written. In those days, before they built the Santa Monica Freeway, if you lived in, say, Beverly Hills or someplace on the west side of Los Angeles, and you wanted to go to the beach, you had to take Pico Boulevard or Olympic Boulevard. But Pico was this particular Eddie Maxwell, who wrote the words to that song. He would take his kids to the beach and he'd drive on Pico. And at the corner of Pico and Sepulveda, they'd often have to wait a long time at the stoplight. In addition to two busy streets, there was also at that time train tracks that crossed right through the middle of that intersection. So you could get stuck at Pico and Sepulveda for maybe 5 minutes or so. So Eddie, the way he explained it, one day started banging on the steering wheel as they waited, and he had these impatient kids with him, and he'd go, Pico and Sepulveda, Pico and Sepulveda, and the kids seemed to enjoy that, so he went home and wrote some more words about different streets in Los Angeles, and then he happened to know Jewel Stein, quite famous, distinguished songwriter, and he was able to talk Jewel Stein into writing a tune for the words, and so they had something that Freddie Martin, the orchestra leader, got interested in and decided to record it. But Freddie was normally recording for RCA Victor Records. For some reason, they weren't interested in that song because they thought it would only sell in Los Angeles. However, there was another little record company associated with the Ambassador Hotel where Freddie Martin often played, and he got to put Pico and Sepulveda out on that label.
Yeah.
So that's how the song came into being. Around 1965, I was making one of my usual visits to the Salvation Army, the one in Santa Monica, which was on Olympic at that time, and I found that record, and I thought, that's got to be curious, a song about Pico and Sepulveda, that intersection's just right near here, so I wonder what that's about. So I took it home, and I enjoyed it and played it for my friends, and they thought it was interesting too. And so 5 years later, the opportunity comes to do the Dr. Demento show and play oddities from my collection, and I arrived at that one, and the audience ate it up. They loved it. So that's how that came to be. And eventually the Roto-Rooter Good Time Christmas Band, which was the first unsolicited tapes that I played on the show. They, in gratitude, recorded an instrumental version of Pico and Sepulveda, which I've used as my theme song ever since.
That's amazing. It's striking me that I do wonder, did you ever have any, not necessarily submissions, but discover anything of the local comedian variety, like stuff that might have ended up in the Salvation Army bin, but was actually for some artist who only worked out of one particular city? Because I found a lot of stand-up like that, but I don't know if there's a lot of novelty songs that were maybe not hits at all, but just like a local record on a local record.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah, here and there. I mean, like songs, for instance, about local college football players.
Okay.
Or other athletes. Sometimes songs by athletes. Like Ron Say, who played third base for the Dodgers for many years, made a record. He's not much of a singer, but somebody wrote a song called Third Base Bag, and he managed to get through it. So I guess they sold that record at Dodger Stadium for a year or two.
Okay.
And I got one. So
That's amazing.
And there's lots of records like that. Lots of records by local DJs who fancy themselves singers,
Sure.
or maybe comedians will record a comedy routine, or often a Christmas routine, something like that. Mm-hmm. So there's local records of all kinds. Some by local bands that don't necessarily have any great localism in what they do, but they're just known in one area, so their record only got distributed in one area. But, of course, records like that sometimes wander somehow to other parts of the country. People will move, and then after they've lived in another city for 20 years, their kids give their records to the Salvation Army.
Sure.
Yeah, including some that were bought somewhere else and mean nothing to the city that they moved to, but they still had them. Yeah, there's been stuff like that all through the history of records.
Sure, and it takes somebody with a mind like yours, and sometimes mine. Sometimes I actually have a brain to think it through, to pick these oddities out and expose them to people. I mean, we turn, because we like instant gratification, we'll turn to YouTube now. We had Napster for a couple of years, but, before that, we had a lot of people's only access to good comedy music was either their parents or you. That's, if nothing else, that you were this massive pop culture filter that gave so many people even their comedic tastes. A friend of mine, his name's Zaki Hassan. He's a great film critic. He lived in Saudi Arabia during the first Gulf War, and he was telling me that Armed Forces Radio was his only link to American culture. So because of that, he had your show to listen to, and that is strictly where his sense of humor comes from. Just your show.
Okay. Yeah, I've talked to a few other people who heard my show over there.
Mm-hmm. It's just crazy that's where they get it. They get it from, the mind of this guy who's you've clearly got this archival mind where you want to you've logged it all away in your head, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you ever plan to put all of it down on paper at some point, but I actually, now would be a good time to talk about, if you want, the documentary.
Yes, well, for the last couple of years, I've been quite involved in the making of a documentary about me called Under the Smogberry Trees. Some people came to us a couple of years ago and said, we'd like to make this movie about you, and we'll launch a Kickstarter campaign to get it going. And so they did. Kickstarter was successful, and we have 80 hours of footage.
Wow.
Interviews with me and with lots of different people that I played on the show, from Weird Al and also with Jimmy Fallon. He was happy to be interviewed because he was a huge fan of the show when he was a kid. And so we've got lots of people on that. But we're not going to do another Kickstarter, I don't think, but we do need some more funding to get it finished, to get it edited, and to license the music, which can be very expensive.
Right. No, I imagine that's the hardest part of it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
but the project is still very much alive, and we certainly hope to get it done soon. But I cannot give you a date.
Sure. Well, I'm excited to see it. That sounds amazing. Do you have plans to put to paper anything equivalent to the kind of stuff you've written for, classical and other music?
Well, people have been urging me to do my autobiography for years, and I was kind of starting to get to it when this film project came into my life. So I concentrated on that for a while, but out of all the interviews that I did for that, we could probably that would probably be a head start towards getting a book written. So
I'd imagine, yeah.
That's alive. That's alive too.
That's exciting.
Again, I can't give you a date.
No, of course. No, I'll just put you to it right now. I need a date and I need a time. So everybody can find you on drdemento.com, of course.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Twitter? Do you have a presence there?
I post. I'm not terribly active on Twitter, but I always post a reminder about the show every Saturday morning, and occasionally something else as it comes along. I'm on Facebook. Tell you a small secret here. You can find me on Facebook under my real name, which is Barrett, B-A-R-R-E-T, Hansen, H-A-N-S-E-N. So look for that on Facebook, and you'll find me. There's what's called the Dr. Demento official Facebook page, which is maintained by the good people at the Funny Music Project, the FUMP for short. And so they maintain it and kick all the spammers off and things like that. But so people will ask me questions, and to the best of my time and ability, I answer them. So, and people can, that's become a good place for people to request stuff for my show.
For sure. Yeah. That's amazing. I just want to make sure that I stress that people should make sure that they listen to your show every Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every Saturday, but you can hear it anytime, and you can hear the older shows anytime. If you miss the show, it's always there.
That's right. You've got, how far back does your archive go?
Well, 1970. There's a couple of shows from even before I got my own show. There's a couple of me as a guest on Stephen's show, and you can hear those too, and hear what I sounded like when I was playing the obscure early rock songs along with the funny stuff, and it's all there. And so you can pretty much pick and choose. There's the Demented Music Database, on which you can go that, dmdb.org, dmdb.org, and you can key in a song title and find all the shows that I played it on.
Wow.
And that will often help if you want to know who did the song Be Prepared. You can just key in Be Prepared, and it'll tell you immediately Tom Lehrer.
That's amazing.
Or you can key in Tom Lehrer, and it will name all the songs that I played by him and how many times I played each one.
Wow. I'm glad somebody else is doing that work for you, because that's just too much to think about.
Yes, we have an official historian. His name is Jeff Morris, and he does a wonderful job.
Well, thanks to people like him for making that stuff available. Thank you for everything that you've done, not just for Comedy on Vinyl, obviously, but for comedy in general.
Okay, Jason.
I could keep you here
more
for
than
a million
welcome.
years. But
right.
Thank you so much for doing the show and for talking to me. And everybody, thank you for listening. And as always, have a good thing.
And don't forget to stay demented.
Comedy on Vinyl is a production of Stolen Dress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klamm. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. Please visit stolendress.com to listen to our other podcasts, read our blogs, read our tweets, watch our videos, and read our books. Please subscribe on iTunes, and if you like us, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. You can find us on facebook.com/comedyonvinyl, Twitter @comedyonvinyl, and find everything else at comedyonvinyl.com.
Why listen to other podcasts that sound like this?
Today on the Pistache Cast, we're going to be talking about the pistachio's closest cousin, the mango.
When you could be listening to this.
Do you think there's ever been a moment on the show one of them accidentally reveals there's a body in his trunk? Like, he's just so enthused to talk about cars. Like, it's an amazing car. Like, I've hid 12 bodies in there.
You can take them down. You can take them down to the pier. No one will even know.
Listen to the Dan and Jay's Comedy Hour podcast every Monday at www.danandjay.com.